Big announcement from the FTC. If you're not in the US or you're somehow not familiar, that stands for the Federal Trade Commission. It's the organization that makes most of the decisions and the rulings around how companies are allowed to operate in the US. And historically, they have not stepped in enough for non-compete rules. What is a non-compete rule, though? Well, if I'm working at a company like Google, maybe I'm working on video at Google, and another company like Netflix or Twitch hits me up saying, hey, Theo, wouldn't it be cool if you worked for us instead? We'll pay you way more. It'll be very different work, but we'll obviously take advantage of the things you learned at your previous job. Well, if I signed a non-compete rule with Google on YouTube, I might not be allowed to work with other companies in the space for some amount of time. This is terrifying. It's resulted in a lot of engineers being scared to leave their jobs because they have so many skills that are specific to the company that they work at now that they're scared they will lose if they or not be able to use or even get sued for trying to if they go somewhere else. These rules suck, and a lot of companies have them. It's basically the norm to sign a non-compete when you join a tech company in the US. Thankfully, I live in California, which means that these rules don't directly affect me. There is no history of a successful enforcement of a non-compete rule against an engineer in California. However, that is not the case for other states. And this is not a thing that I think should exist in the entire US. Funny enough, whether you're into free markets or socialism, I think we can all agree that nobody benefits other than the company when a company strictly enforces its employees cannot work at other companies in the space. It makes competition worse. It makes the lives of those employees worse. It makes it less likely you get paid a fair amount of money. All of these things suck, and it makes a lot of sense that they're finally being struck down, and I want to read over what the FTC is doing. The FTC's final rule will generate over 8,500 new businesses each year, raise worker wages, lower healthcare costs, and boost innovation. I will say it's hard to know all of these things, and having the type of bold statement from a .gov site's a little bit scary because we do not know any of these things yet. But I wouldn't be surprised either because there's a lot of opportunity here. Today, the FTC issued a final rule to promote competition by banning non-competes nationwide, protecting the fundamental freedom of workers to change jobs, increase innovation, and foster new business formation. Non-compete clauses keep wages low, suppress new ideas, and they rob the American economy of dynamism, including for more than 8,500 new startups that would be created a year once non-competes are banned, said the FTC chair, Lena M. Khan. The FTC's final rule to ban non-competes will ensure Americans have the freedom to pursue a new job, start a new business, or bring a new idea to market. This is another important part. Let's say when I quit Twitch, I wanted to make a Twitch alternative. I wanted to make a new streaming service or platform. Now imagine I had signed a non-compete with Twitch and I didn't work in California. Theoretically, my attempt to do different things, including what I ended up doing, which was Ping, which was building a better product for streamers to collaborate. Technically speaking, they could have sued me for doing this. And I absolutely had that fear when I was going into it. In fact, it was a thing that investors would bring up when I was talking to them, when I was raising money for Ping. People were terrified of these rules. The fact that I had signed a piece of paper that technically said Amazon and Twitch could sue me if I built something too similar or worked on something too similar is terrifying. Another great question from chat from Timmy. Is this different from an NDA? Yes, an NDA is a non-disclosure agreement. It means you cannot talk about things you did at the job. So if I worked on some new service and I had an NDA signed, I won't be able to talk about that with others. NDAs tend to have a date where they expire, either legally or in the paperwork itself, which means usually with an NDA, it's like you can't talk about this for 2 years. You could work on other similar things though. And if I have an NDA that says I can't tell you about this feature, I might still be able to tell you about other things that I've worked on. NDAs are definitely enforceable everywhere. Depending on the NDA, you can write one that isn't enforceable. But when it comes to what we're talking about here, which is non-competes, it's no longer you can't talk about the thing, it's you can't do the thing. You're no longer allowed to work with these tools. You're no longer allowed to talk about this thing. You're no longer allowed to be involved in this space for some amount of time. Contractors can sign non-competes, but it's not particularly common. Regardless, companies love to do these things where it wasn't even uncommon back in the day to hire a person, not because you wanted them to work at your company, but because you didn't want them to work somewhere else. And if you hired them, even if you fired them or they quit some amount after, you end up with a 2 to 4 year window where they can't work for your competition. This resulted in super anti-competitive behaviors by a lot of these companies, and I'm really thankful this is now changing. Yeah, non-competes are made to lock you in even if you don't want to work there anymore. Yep, it means the likelihood that we move, that we make new things, that we work at other companies making new things, all of these things are fundamentally worse when non-competes are enforceable. So banning them is huge for pursuing new jobs, starting new businesses, or bringing new ideas to market. Yep, this is a phenomenal statement. Shout out to Lena Khan for putting this so definitively, because it should be treated as such. The FTC estimates that the final rule banning non-competes will lead to new business formation growing by 2.7% per year, resulting in more than 8,500 additional new businesses created each year. I'm a little skeptical of this. One of my hot takes around running companies is that the problem isn't that they're hard to do. It's like, it's hard to make a company. The same way it's like hard to make YouTube videos or it's hard to learn to code. The thing is that it's also hard to be good at YouTube. It's hard to make a good business and it's hard to make good code. So making it easier to get started doesn't necessarily result in more people finding success doing the thing. Are there engineers whose only reservation for not starting a company is the fact that a non-compete might hit them? Yes. But those people have lots of other options. They could move to California. They could work on other things in the general space that might not affect that non-compete. They could hire a lawyer to help them figure out if it's even enforceable or not. There are options that existed before this. The fact that you had to do them sucked. But if you want to run a business, a lot of things suck. And if that's what stopped you, my spicy take is that you weren't going to succeed in the first place. If the only reason you didn't start a business was the non-compete being enforceable, you probably would not have been a good company founder. So while we might see this 2% or this 3% number, I am skeptical that the companies that are only forming because of this rule change are going to be particularly successful. The same way that like making a tool that makes it way easier to record videos or go live on Twitch doesn't mean there's more good streamers. If you're familiar with Twitch and the idea of streaming, this room that I'm currently recording this from, I just swapped out my like $3,000 light for a cheaper like $500 one here. I have another $600-ish light as my backlight here. I have my Rodecaster audio interface, which is like $1,000 with everything I have attached to it. My microphone, which is another $400+ my computer, which is $3,000, my camera, which is $2,000, the lens and everything. This room costs $10+ This is what a really high-end setup looks like. You don't need this, but I like it. However, you do need the computer. You do need a real OBS setup. You do need your stuff together, especially audio, if you want to make even watchable content. I bring this up because previously Twitch made a kind of dumb thing. Twitch decided that they should throw all of the stuff that you're supposed to do on Twitch onto the Xbox and PlayStation so that you can stream straight from your Xbox. Guess what? Not a single relevant streamer started with console streaming. There were not people who would have been big streamers if only it was easier to stream. Because the harsh reality is once you're taking it seriously, you got to put in a lot of time, a lot of money, and just actually insane levels of effort to do this right. And if you're not willing to do that, you're not going to be successful with certain things. I don't think this is the case for something like engineering, where if we make it easier for people to start learning to code, they are more likely to get a job in code. They're less likely to invent some modern crazy technology, though. The people who need help getting in are not the ones who are going to be the most successful. The ones who, despite the lack of help getting in, do it anyways. Those are the people who are going to be successful. And when it comes to starting businesses, especially when it comes to starting large, venture-backed, potentially billion-dollar companies, that doesn't happen because you made a rule change. That happens because a person, despite what the rules currently are, decided they would dedicate their lives to doing something insane. So while, again, I sympathize with this number being placed here, I have a lot of reservations about everything associated with it because I just don't see a future where people who stopped hesitating because of this change are actually going to be successful. Regardless, this is an awesome change. I just wanted to say that this one number is a thing I don't care about. The same way that like half of streams on Twitch were probably coming from people streaming on console, but 100% of those streams were shit. Anyways, the final rule is expected to result in higher earnings for workers. This, actually, I fully agree with. If you now have the ability to go to companies that are closer to the one you're at, if instead of going from Netflix to a bank, you can now go from Netflix to Amazon Prime, where previously those companies being so close meant you might not be able to do it due to the non-compete, suddenly you're much more valuable in the market. And now you can compete with different companies to get better offers to increase your salary at your current job or get another opportunity somewhere else. That I totally agree with. The estimated earnings increase for the average worker being an additional $524 per year, and it's expected to lower healthcare costs by up to $194 billion over the next decade. These are two very interesting numbers. I'd be curious how they generated those. In addition, the final rule is expected to help drive innovation, leading to an estimated average increase of 17,000 to 29,000 more patents each year for the next 10 years under the final rule. I have feelings about software patents, especially, that I'm curious to see how that goes. But I don't personally believe more patents is more good, but I get why they would. Non-competes are a widespread and often exploitative practice imposing contractual conditions that prevent workers from taking a new job or starting a new business. Non-competes often force workers to either stay in a job they want to leave or bear other significant harms and costs, such as being forced to switch to a lower paying field, being forced to relocate, being forced to leave the workforce altogether, or being forced to defend against expensive litigation. An estimated 30 million workers, nearly 1 in 5 Americans, are subjected to non-competes. That's a great paragraph. No notes. Basically everything I've been saying so far. Still skeptical of all the numbers they're dropping here. But yeah, 18% of workers being covered by non-competes is terrifying, and all of them being free is very exciting. Somebody asked a good question. This must be bad for somebody though, right? Yes. The companies that don't want to lose their workers or pay them more. As a CEO, I'm a CEO in California where all my employees are Californian or fucking Swedish where they're protected by the EU. So this doesn't affect me either way. But theoretically, especially if I started this company 10 to 20 years ago, it'd be really nice to know that the people I hire could never be poached by competition. Like, very nice. So as a founder, I could see the desire to make sure my employees that I taught deeply, that I've been working with forever, that I've been paying a reasonable salary, I don't have to worry about them going anywhere or asking for more money. So it benefits the companies. And as such, these changes hurt the companies. But I don't think the way that they're hurting companies is particularly bad. I think this is fair and makes the market freer. People keep asking, how does this affect countries that aren't the US? The EU already has decent rules about this, but it's exciting to see all of the stuff going on in the US now too, because it's where most of the companies are based out of. It's where a lot of their employees are. The US has been behind on this and we're finally not. And certain states like Florida just kind of let you enforce non-competes and NDAs to keep people from having any other opportunities. It's surprisingly common to do such. Under the FTC's new rules, existing non-competes for the vast majority of workers will no longer be enforceable after the rule's effective date. That's cool. That this is based on the rules date, not on the date of your previous non-compete signing. So even if you signed a non-compete in the past, it will no longer be enforceable. Other really good point from chat from Kevin. This is arguably a bigger deal in engineering outside of software. My chemical engineering family members are so happy to see this news. Yeah, that's a very fair point, because in chemical engineering, the difference between jobs is much smaller. Where with software dev, the difference between working at Netflix and working at Bank of America is massive. So you can still switch between roles without a non-compete being enforceable. Whereas in chemical engineering, the jobs are way more similar. So the likelihood that you can have this handled is way lower. Imagine like a hair salon. They have non-competes too. There's so many random jobs you could have that a non-compete could just destroy your opportunity to explore and do other things. I will say I haven't seen many hair salons or things like that with non-competes because they're usually very different relationships where they haven't actually hired the employees. The employees are like their own separate contracting layer. Depends a lot in the business. Regardless, this benefits a lot of people. Existing non-competes for senior executives who represent less than 0.75% of workers can remain in force under the FTC's final rule. Interesting that senior execs can still be enforced like this. I actually didn't know that was part of the rule. But employers are banned from entering into or attempting to enforce any new non-competes, even if they involve senior executives. Okay. So existing senior execs might get fucked, but new senior execs, all good. Huge. This might result in a significant amount of churn where like executives at one company move to another. Because right now, as an executive, moving from like Twitch to Netflix, sketchy, especially if you don't live in California. Now though, go nuts. Very exciting. Employers will be required to provide notice to workers other than senior execs who are bound by an existing non-compete that they won't be enforcing any non-competes against them. That's actually huge too. Forcing the companies to notify their employees that they will no longer be enforcing the non-compete against them. That's a really cool thing. I'm excited for a lot of people to get this email and YouTube search end up on this video. Let me know in the comments if you're here because you just got one of those notices. In January of 2023, the FTC issued their proposed rule, which was subject to a 90-day public comment period. They received over 26,000 comments on the proposed rule, with over 25,000 of them in support of the FTC's proposed ban on non-competes. The comments informed the FTC's final rulemaking process, with the FTC carefully reviewing each comment and making changes to the proposed rule in response to the public's feedback. In the final rule, the Commission has determined that it is an unfair method of competition and therefore a violation of Section 5 of the FTC Act for employers to enter into non-competes with workers and to enforce certain non-competes. Good shit. The Commission found that non-competes tend to negatively affect competitive conditions in labor markets by inhibiting efficient matching between workers and employers. Yes, again, if you're already skilled in one area, you have to move to a different enough area to not hit the non-compete. Just makes obvious sense. The Commission found that non-competes tend to negatively affect competitive conditions in products and service markets. Again, same reason. If you worked at Netflix and you saw an alternative path to make a better product, they might not let you. And that would inhibit new businesses forming and also innovating. There's also evidence that non-competes lead to increased market concentration and higher prices for consumers. That sounds right to me. Exciting stuff. So what are the alternatives to non-competes? The Commission found that employers have several alternatives to non-competes that still enable firms to protect their investments without having to enable a non-compete. Trade secret laws and non-disclosure agreements both provide employers with well-established means to protect proprietary and other sensitive information. Researchers estimate that over 95% of workers with a non-compete already have an NDA. Look at that. The NDAs will continue to be a thing, but as I mentioned before, way less big of a deal. And if your control of your innovations as a business owner can't be properly protected via NDA and patent, then they're not meaningful innovations or things that you should hold. The fact that a non-compete was the way that companies would hold their position in a market was terrifying, and I'm pumped that's over. The commission also finds that instead of using non-competes to lock in workers, employers that wish to retain employees can compete on the merits for the workers' labor services by improving wages and working conditions. Oh boy. I love when the FTC does these slapdowns. Like, oh, you're scared you're going to lose your employees because of this? Pay them better. Yeah. Changes from the NPRM. Under the final rule, existing non-competes for senior execs can remain in force. Yep, we already know that. Can't do new ones. The final rule defines senior executives as workers earning more than $151,664 annually and who are in policy-making positions. Okay, first off, what a fucking number. How did this number get picked? I wish they would source these things because that's such a strange number to just put there. Respect to them for it, but geez. The other part here that I'm scared of is in policy-making positions. This is vague enough that I could see a company like Amazon, for example, where like, I'll be transparent. I made a lot more than this much money when I worked at Twitch and Amazon. If you count my stock, I made a lot more money than this when I worked at Twitch and Amazon. I also made decisions around how my teams were run. Do I count? That's a weird thing that I don't know. I actually think I would fall within this ruling because even though I'm not an exec, and hell, I was never even technically senior at Twitch. I made way more money than this, and I made decisions around the company policy, at least in the world of my team. Thankfully, if I was to go somewhere else, I'm fine because this will no longer work. This is just for existing non-competes, not for new ones. So if I was to get a new role right now, unenforceable. This is in California, also unenforceable. Yeah. Interesting. I know people who are going to be hit by this part in particular, and that makes me sad. Additionally, the commission has eliminated a provision in the proposed rule that would have required employers to legally modify existing non-competes by formally rescinding them. This change will help to streamline compliance. Also nice. Instead of forcing them to update the rules, just blanket destroy them. Another fun comment from Zico. I just realized something. The only way that GCP and Azure can get better is this, since AWS has a really shitty non-compete for like 6 to 12 months. That's fair. Okay, the policy making is more defined in the actual rule. Do I have to read that? The threshold is based on the 85th percentile of earnings of full-time salaried workers nationally. That's a decent way to generate the number. Let's find the actual rule. Policy-making authority means final authority to make policy decisions that control significant aspects of a business entity or common enterprise, and it does not include authority limited to advising or exerting influence over such policy decisions, or having final authority to make policy decisions for only a subsidiary or an affiliate of a common enterprise. Okay, vague-ish. This one's a little clearer. Policymaking position means a business entity's president, CEO, or the equivalent, or any other officer of a business entity who has policymaking authority, or any other natural person who has policymaking authority for the business entity, similar to an officer with policymaking authority. An officer of a subsidiary or affiliate of a business entity that is part of a common enterprise who has policymaking authority for the common, they are deemed as well. So yeah, if you don't operate like a subsidiary business or you're an executive right below the CEO, sounds like the policymaking escape here likely won't affect you. So that's good. That makes me feel a little less scared. Interesting that the vote was 3-2. I want to read what the people who said negative things had to say. So it was Melissa and Andrew said no. So we'll start with the no's and then we'll go to the yeses. What did Melissa have to say? Article 1 of the Constitution vests all legislative powers in Congress. Cool. Is this just going to be that Congress should do this, not us? With these important constitutional issues in mind, a threshold question must be answered for non-compete clause rules. See the final rule. Does the commission have the authority to promulgate? That word makes me feel like I have dyslexia. Jesus. I believe the answer is no, and therefore I respectfully dissent. Okay, so this person's issue is that the FTC can't make rules, so they shouldn't be making a rule here. There is no clear congressional authorization under Section 5 of the FTC Act for promulgation of the final rule, and therefore agree with Commissioner Ferguson's reasons. Okay, so you're citing Ferguson as your reason. Let's see what Ferguson had to say then. I am sympathetic to the policy embodied in the final rule. Anglo-American law has regarded non-compete agreements with deep suspicion for centuries. They cut against the grain of our ancient common law traditions, protecting every man's right to ply his trade, and may in some circumstances undermine competition and innovation. Why do they all talk like this? Why is this long? Why is there like this much citation on like half a paragraph? The number of citations here is actually insane. Beginning with policy puts the cart before the horse. Lawmakers, okay, actually, I hate that I agree with the statement. I've said this many a time. I wish that these laws were written more around demonstrated harms rather than gut feels, especially the EU bullshit. But yeah, writing legislation on vibes instead of acting on specific harms, scary. That said, not only are there actual harms, there are measured ones that they cited many times throughout the thing that we just read. I think that this policy is actually a really nice cart that has been attached to the horse because we've learned a lot. There is demonstrated harm, so I'm more okay with this. But yeah, in other cases, I would totally agree, but I don't think we'll see if he actually pushes back meaningfully. Lawmaking by the administrative state sits uncomfortably in a democracy. There's going to be the same argument. Americans cannot vote us out when we get it wrong. Yeah, but they asked for comments, and the comments were very universal. The administrative state can act with greater dispatch than Congress, but the difficulty of legislating Congress is a feature of the Congress or Constitution's design, not a fault. Okay, so my gut feel here is that these two people were added to the FTC to make sure they can never do anything. See, Republican? Yeah, Republican. I'm assuming the other one is too. That's how this goes. Yep. So these are people whose only role in the FTC is to say, oh, by the way, we don't actually think the FTC should be able to do anything. This sucks. Annoying. I miss when the Republican Party was more interested in competition. Like, isn't their whole thing free and fair markets? Because this is a very nice thing for free and fair markets. Yeah. I remember the days where Republicans used to fight for these things, not against them. Republicans are trying to sue to block it. Plaintiff trying to reverse non-compete ban is Trump's tax advisor. G. Brent Ryan has advised Trump on tax policy. His company is dedicated to liberating our clients from the burden of being overtaxed. Officials in North Dakota complained internally that Ryan burdened and antagonized tax officials there by throwing stuff at the wall to see what sticks with little to no effort on their part to provide meaningful documentation. I have heard too many stories of people trying to get around tax shit by just sending so much obnoxious information, just barely legally, in order to piss off tax officials and get out of stuff. So this does not surprise me. I guess they are saying that that description fits this lawsuit, which claims that the agency has no authority to write a rule to ban non-compete agreements. And even if it did, the rule would be an unconstitutional delegation of legislative power to the executive branch or a violation of the so-called major questions doctrine because it affects so many workers. For good measure, the complaint also suggests that the FTC is unconstitutional. Joy, 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 joy. It's a standard set of right-wing arguments against both doing something against non-competes and the administrative state in general. We need more Republicans to stand up against this shit, guys. Like, come on. I know I have Republicans that are staying in my audience. I know y'all are here. Let me know in the comments that you're both a Republican and you think it is absolute fucking bullshit that this type of anti-competition, like anti-free market stuff was possible. A non-compete is not part of a free market. The ability to prevent an employee from going to other companies is not something that should be functional inside of a free and fair market. I would genuinely hope, look, we're already seeing people in chat. I've been leaning Republican lately, and yeah, this legislation is good. I don't care if the FCC is the one to do it, but I'm glad someone is. Yeah. Cool. Imagine flooding the NRA with members and voting them into oblivion because none of them think they should do anything. Yeah, it's obnoxious. I hate this is going to become a political video. I didn't want it to, but as per usual, there are Republicans that are just put on the commission for no fucking reason other than to block things. And it's really, really annoying that like 2 of the 5 people here, their only rule is to say no. That's it. Ugh. Yeah, this should not be a political issue. This should be a very clear, like, free and fair trade is not being allowed in the United States because of these existing non-compete things. The FTC's role is to make sure that free and fair trade exists in the United States. This is only fair. That's all I got on this one. We went from engineering competition to my history at Twitch to politics, of course. Let me know what you guys think in the comments because there's going to be other fucking chaos otherwise. Until next time, peace, nerds.